One P. One, actually.
Oh, one?
Yeah, you're living in the future still.
Yeah.
So, first of all, can everyone hear us okay?
Yes.
Great. Second of all, we're both Irish. We speak quickly. If we start speaking too quickly, raise your hand and start waving so we can slow down. I say that at the start because later we're going to get excited and we'll forget. It has happened before. So, I'm Erika Everest.
And I am Lasairiona McMaster.
And we are here to talk about anthologies because together we coordinated the 20Books anthologies during the plague, basically. When we all didn't have a conference and we needed something to do. So, but we started off with one, which became 4, and then 2 other genres set up as well. So in the end there were 6 20Books anthologies, of which we ran 4 of them. So that's why we're here to talk to you about anthologies, because in addition to that,
I have done one on my own.
As a coordinator?
As a coordinator, so I have run one by myself.
And I was the manager for 4 others for LMBPM. So that's our background. I want to do a quick show of hands here. How many people are here because they're interested in submitting to an anthology, and how many because they would like to run an anthology themselves? So hands up for submitting, and hands up for running one themselves. Pretty even, okay. Hands up for who's just here to heckle.
All of you can.
Okay, so do you want to start?
So first of all, I had no experience with anthologies before 20Books. And I did not volunteer to do the 20Books anthology. I logged into Facebook one day and found out that Craig had tagged me in a post and said that I was doing it. But the anthology that, the first anthology was a sweet romance anthology, and I'm not a sweet romance author. So there was very clearly a conflict. So we convinced him to run a spicy one as well, so I could actually contribute to the anthology instead of just running it. So it wasn't like I had any experience with it to begin with. As far as what an anthology is, it is a self-contained short story, and the anthology itself is a collection of those, where people write in the same genre or subgenre. So, like I said, sweet and steamy. We did not want to contaminate people's also bots by having steamy authors write with sweet and vice versa. So for the purposes of 20Books, our anthology word count was between 5,000 and 8,000. For my own anthology, it was 10. I am writing pieces for next year that run between 12 and 15. So there is a very wide spectrum. Some have like full-fledged novels, some have novellas, some have short stories. So you need to kind of set that expectation from the beginning, and Craig was very clear that between 5,000 and 8,000 words was our sweet spot for this, so we could have a number of authors under one book.
Yeah. One of the big things is when you're submitting to an anthology, read the rules. Every year, Kevin J. Anderson posts about the Western Colorado graduate program who put together an anthology. That's part of their coursework. And he says, well, anyone here want to submit a story for it? Every year, there's at least 5 people who jump up and say, the link doesn't work for me. It says submissions are closed. I was like, no, they're not open yet. Because if you read it, it says, opening on, and we're not there yet. Knowing the word count, knowing the expectations is really important to showing whether or not you're an author, an anthology organizer is going to want to work with. If you can't read the instructions to follow them at the submission stage, but you won't follow them at the end, and when we're 2 weeks before we're going to print, and you turn up with something that's twice as long as it's meant to be, and now there's no room in the book for it, and we're either going to be short or over, that's a bad experience for everybody involved. So to know that that's why sometimes these lists are so detailed. Partly it's to make the organisers' lives easier, that you've already formatted, provided in a particular layout that makes everything consistent. partially it's a check whether or not you're willing to play by the rules that this anthology is working to, rather than saying, well, when I did a previous anthology, this is how we did it, so I think that's fine.
We were very ruthless as well. So our first round was you had to submit 500 words, and we had a team of people, so it wasn't just like one person said yes or no. We recruited beta readers in each of the genres. We had about 5 of them, and they scored each of the 500 words. And if you got like above a certain score, you were yes. If you got below, you were a no. There was a middle ground for like
maybes,
a wait list, but we were very ruthless with our, if you can't read the rules, if you can't submit by a certain date, if you can't submit, like if we said 500 words and you went to 1,000, that was a no. I mean, 500, if you went to like 6, that was one thing, but if you gave us like 1,200, it was we didn't even read the words. If you cannot follow the rules, we just said no.
Of course, one person did follow them to the letter, and the sentence cut off in the middle of it. On the other hand, they did get invited to submit the full story because we needed to know what happened.
She left us hanging, literally, in the middle of the sentence. The next thing was, because it was short stories, a lot of people don't realize that short story writing is it's a trick, it's a knack, it's a talent that you have to hone. It's not just something that you can take your full novel idea and cram it into 7,000 or 8,000 words. There is a framework, a skill, and one of our anthology contributors, she had a framework that she worked, so she writes in steamy romance and she does short stories as her like bread and butter. So she had a framework that she gave to the group willingly, which we also gave to like Sweet, and it was just a framework that said, it was like 8 chapters, and here is the arc for a short story, and I think that helped our writers figure out what we were looking for. And what I've learned, especially from running my own anthology, is setting your expectations up front is paramount. Be very clear if you want to run one, be very, very clear down to, like, even if you think you are being clear, have someone else read it and be like, have somebody who's not an author read it and say, like, can you follow these instructions? Is it clear? Or do you have any questions? Because no matter how clear we thought we were being, there was always at least one person who had a question that we hadn't thought about. So set your expectations up front. And if you are contributing, read the expectations, like Erika said, and don't send in like 10,000 words for a 6,000 word submission. You will, if you're like us, we are very strategic. We were putting it together for Craig, who is a Marine, who likes, and we had a time schedule. We did not have time for people who did not follow the rules.
And you'll find that most anthologies are like that because they've already set up their date to go to print, to when they're going to have their formatter available, the promo graphics. You're just one part, a small cog in that wheel. They're not going to hold it up for you. But if you're holding them up, you get cut. So you need to work that through as well as to making sure that you know that you can commit, and if you can't, to communicate early about what's changed for you and why. So I think that's a really important thing that we learned, is about understanding those expectations. One other thing I'd like to say about the craft of the short story is we found people often thought of it as like the intro chapter to their full novel. As in, like, this was the kind of the setting the scene, like
the backstory.
But nothing has happened. This story has not been resolved. I don't mind an open loop to get me to read your series. This needs to be complete. And it was either a snippet or a scene or a vignette, or it was like the opening arc. You're like, and that's it, really? That's not a satisfying story experience. And what's really challenging about that is to think about your normal word count, and then imagine that you're talking about a fifth, a tenth, like 2% of your normal word count is all you've got to work with. How many subplots can you have? None. You have to have a rather simple main plot. One of the things we found for romance particularly was, if you do second chance romance, You don't have to do a long build-up of how do they know each other. They can do their meet cute, but they've already got the history and know that past, so that allows you to skip over a lot of the setup chapters. It's things like that, trying to work out how do you jump into
your world
quickly without losing people. It's a little bit more difficult in fantasy, sci-fi, world building, rich environments, because you don't have words for world building. So how can you, through the actions of your characters, through their dialogue, convey what's important about that world? Because we don't need to know about the intergalactic conflict over there. We just need to know that these two people are on opposite sides and their starships are about to go to battle. We don't need to know the full history of why, because most of the time that's not relevant. So what is absolutely critical to your story, and make every word count to build that complete story experience, because you have to be able to deliver a full story in order to hook people in for other work.
I think also from the beginning you need to figure out why you want to contribute to this particular anthology, right? You need to figure out your why, what your goals are from it, what you want out of the process.
There are a lot of reasons why someone would get involved in an anthology, and I want to run through some of them first of all. Newsletter building. It might be a chance to grow your newsletter by everybody who's involved sends it to all of their readers, and then it's basically a giant group swap. That can be really valuable.
Money is obviously what we all want, right?
But we've got some stories about to give you an idea of temper your expectations when it comes to anthologies. Exposure. Hey, we all do it with exposure, right? But if you tailor it right, it can actually help. If you're getting a chance to work with the big names, not in your genre, but in your niche. If it's drilled down, so those also often really, really favour you, then that exposure is valuable, because you're getting right in front of the readers who should be your readers, but they don't know you exist yet. But that's the only type of exposure that's really worth, taking time out of a book that's going to earn you money, because you have to make sure you're getting in front of the right people. When we were looking at sweet and steamy mix, that's not going to be good for anybody. And even within that, there's so many different layers in romance. But the same is true in even mystery and thriller. It is psychological thriller, action and adventure, vigilante justice, cozy, hard noir. They're all in this umbrella, but how closely aligned are you to that?
I'm actually a victim of this, so I submitted to an anthology before I started to run one, and it was for charity, and I thought, okay, I will submit, and I ended up with Craig Martell in my Also Bots as a spicy romance author. And it has taken me a year and a half to get him out. So you want your alignment in an anthology to be, I like Craig and I like his books, but he is not a steamy romance author, he is not a hockey romance author, and I do not want him in my Also Bots on Amazon. So you really need to focus on somebody who writes in your, niche it all the way down if you can. So I'm a steamy hockey romance author, and next year I'm only doing steamy hockey romance or sports romance anthologies next year.
Add a push.
Add a push.
But generative romance is too
broad. Yeah. The other thing is that it gives you a potential to level up your craft, but most anthologies require a fully edited short story for submission, which we found, again, it was a very broad interpretation. Some people thought that running it past their beta readers were enough.
Or Grammarly.
Or Pro Writing Aid, but us and the beta readers that we had all recognized when a piece was not edited. Readers are not stupid, they knew. And then when we went to these authors, they were like, yeah, we didn't do that. So it really is important to make sure that you submit the highest quality work that you can produce if you really want to contribute to an anthology.
Where the opportunity to level up your craft can come is if it's an anthology that will be edited, so you submit your first draft or polished draft, and they will edit it and give you feedback to a certain degree. It's almost like getting a critique feedback. but from somebody in your genre, in your niche, who knows your audience, that can be very valuable in terms of tightening up the things that will resonate best with your readers. But there are very few anthologies where that is part of it, because again, there's time for that. So a lot of times that onus is on you to make sure your story is as good as it can be. And you also have to work out who are the people you're working with. If they're not going to be as professional as you are, if they're going to put in sort of work and just sort of dial it in and not do the work, do you want your book alongside theirs? If there's a whole lot of comments in the reviews about, great stories, but the number of typos and grammar, it was just really difficult to read. Are people even going to find your story if they've come for other people and got turned off by that? And you're there like, I paid $1,500 to get this edited. No one even saw it.
If people read a bad story and their story is third in the book and it's a book of 40 stories, they won't read past that one, right? They're not gonna get to your stories because this one has pulled them out of everything because of typos or whatever. So it really is important. It's a team sport, right? An anthology is a team thing. You all need to play your part.
So having talked about what you can get from an anthology, you need to think about why would you do it? Do any of these things sound like the thing that you want from the anthology? And if you look at the anthology that's being described, can they meet those needs for you? We talked about money. To give you some ballparks, the 20Books anthologies, Craig, and this is not standard, but this is how Craig runs them, he gave everybody an upfront payment against the royalties that would be earned from the anthology. And then when the full tally was known after the 3-month run, and that's when rights reverted, then the balance was split among all the authors and paid.
It was an equal royalty split. He covered the cover for each of the anthologies, so there was no buy-in, there was an upfront payment, we all did our own editing, there was no outgoings for us to participate in his anthologies, which is not common. For the most part, authors will, like the leader will probably want something for the cover, something for advertising. Craig paid for the advertising, like the paid promos and Fussy Librarian and that kind of stuff. But that is not typical. How he ran his anthologies is atypical. For the most part, you will be expected to pay something.
I would just say it is atypical for the indie space. In trad, you will be expected, you can expect for a reputable publication that you will be paid per word. So it's like 6 cents a word or 8 cents a word, depending on that. It may be a little less depending on the reputation of the publication. But therefore, if you work it out, and 5 cents a word is, why did I say work it out?
I don't know, because I'm not the math person, so you're on your own right now.
It's actually not that much that you would make even for 8,000 words of a story. It's about $200.
Come on, Jen, hurry up.
And so it's not huge money. And then in the same way, for the steamy romance anthology,
for $400 for 8,000.
Thank you.
What was it? Can you say
$400
$400 for
8,000.
5 cents for
Yes.
for
And how many words?
For 8,000 words.
8,000.
Sorry, I couldn't math on the fly, and I should have thought of this beforehand.
That's why we're here.
The final tally for Sweet Romance, which was the most lucrative of all of the things, $5,200. That was split 26 ways.
And it was a 3-month period in KU. And it had Alana Johnson in it.
Who probably brought in
A lot of
about 50% of that all by herself. But that's it. One that was the whole 20Books community behind it, advertised in KU, discount periods, Kindle Unlimited days, all of it, 5,000. And then that's divided among the number of people. Now, if you have to take out advertising costs and cover costs and running costs, none of which were the case in 20Books. But that's about what anthologies make. They're not huge money makers. So if you're doing this expecting that you're going to be making bank, you're not. So is it worth it for something else? You know, and for some people, $400 or $500 is good money, especially if it doesn't take you that long to write those words and the process is relatively painless that you submit and so forth. For somebody else, for whom words are long, and this is a 2-month detour from their main work, is that going to be worth the return? No one can answer that question for you but you, and it also depends on what other forms of payment you're getting in terms of the exposure, the connections, the people you can...
The newsletter subscribers.
Yeah. And the authors that you're working with, who you might now be able to message on Facebook that you previously couldn't even have said hello to, who'll know your name, who'll come and say hello. Those connections can be just as valuable, because while the anthology mightn't do much, you can go into Alana Johnson's Facebook group and tell them about your sweet romance in the future. What's that worth to you? So it's not just about the money, but people who go into anthologies thinking that they're going to make huge money tend to be like, oh, is that all? Yeah, it is. It is small, and that is why. So just to be aware of those aspects.
And for organizers, so Craig has a contract that everybody had to sign. He has in his collaborations book at the back of it, he has an example contract for people to look at and get an idea of the kind of things.
It's in the file section of 20Books as well.
Yeah. And I basically used his contract as a framework for my own anthology. He's a lawyer. He's done this a lot. So as a submitter, make sure you read the contractual details before you sign it, and make sure you can deliver on that contractual promise before you sign it and send it in. And for those who are running it, make sure you have all of your bases covered.
So one of the areas around the contract to be thinking about, and one of the reasons why an anthology piece might appeal, if you're writing a reader magnet to build your newsletter, what are you getting paid to write your newsletter? I mean, if someone's going to pay you $200 or $300 for something you were going to be writing anyway, you leave it for 6 months and then you get to use it forevermore to build your newsletter, well, that seems like a good plan. Do you have the rights to do that, or have you sold them completely? Is this in perpetuity? What about digital rights versus paperback rights? So for 20Books, it was paperback in perpetuity, but ebook only for the term of it was first published rights, basically, so a 3-month exclusive term, after which all digital rights revert to the author.
So if you go on Kindle or if you go on Amazon now, you will be able to get a paperback copy of all of Craig's anthologies, but you cannot buy an ebook anymore because of the 3-month term.
Who gets the royalties on that paperback copy?
Quite frankly, it doesn't sell that much, so there aren't really any to achieve. But the reason the paperback stays up is that for authors who were first-time authors or early in their career, where this might be the only thing that they have to show or to put their name on, or to even have the proof of, I published with these other authors, isn't it great? Once the ebook comes down, that evidence is gone. The paperback shows that link forever. So that's a nice part about having the paperback in perpetuity. But what about the digital rights? So for some anthologies, they revert completely and the ebook is gone. For others, the exclusivity reverses. So they still have the right to publish the ebook, but you can also do something with that copy. But here's the thing. You can't do KU with that copy now because you don't have exclusive rights to it. Now, if the anthology is in KU, no, actually you still can't because you didn't publish it. So you can't publish content in KU that isn't yours, and they have the rights to it and the first rights in KU. So you just need to consider that. Now you can use it as your reader magnet and you can do other things with it, but you need to know what your rights are.
The details matter. And I know it's boring sitting to read a contract and to make sure that all of the fine print fits with what you need it to fit with, but it really is important because you don't want to sign away rights that you want to do things with in the future.
Next question is audio rights. Did they get automatically included? Because a short story if you get a voiceover, even if you were to use AI, Google voice to text, could start a mailing list, reader magnet for your audiobooks. But do you have the right to do that? Or have you also bundled in your audio rights for an audiobook that will never be made? So you just need to think about, what do you want out of this? And read the contract carefully. Don't assume that you know what it means. And if you have your list of things I want this story to be able to do for me now and in the future, then it's very easy to go and check. That's clear, that's clear. I'm not sure if this clause lets me do that. Let me ask that question.
And as organisers, we'd suggest to be very clear in your contract as well. Don't make it harder for someone to submit than it already is. Make it incredibly clear as you can be, that these are the terms of the contract, these are the rights that are being taken temporarily, and this is the date they will return to the people who submit. Do your best to help your submitters' life easier.
And if for some reason you are asking for perpetual rights and you're not reverting rights, don't hide that in the fine print. Just be upfront. Let them know, because you don't want to be that person in the author community who's making life difficult. If there's a reason you want to keep those perpetual rights, just say, well, look, this is what I'm doing, and if you're not okay with that, don't waste my time. But don't try and just hope they don't notice and they don't ask for it. Because it just makes everybody unhappy at the end, because people think that you misled them. Because I assumed I'd get them back. Oh, did you read the contract? But if you stated it completely explicitly, they can't complain that they didn't know.
And in that same vein, if you are applying to an anthology, do your research about the organiser. Have they done an anthology before?
Do they pay promptly?
Do they have a bad reputation for not working well with others? Are they shady?
Do they communicate well with their authors? Do they make sure you know when the dates are? If there's a promo being run, are you informed in time so that you can, inform your people about it? Are you, asked to pay upfront costs to contribute to the cover? And then, when you're already committed and you're in, asked to pay more money because, well, we have to promote it. Or suddenly you find at the end, oh, well, yeah, we made all this money, but we had to spend an awful lot doing advertising, so there's actually no money left over to pay you any royalties from this. Know who you're working with.
And some authors do multiple anthologies at the same time, so they can't possibly have the time and resources that they need to dedicate to push your anthology. So make sure they're not multitasking and releasing a ton of anthologies when you want something from it, right? You need to make sure that that person can deliver what they say they can deliver and what you need it to deliver.
I think that's all of the key questions about what to look out for, how to know whether it's a good fit, and how to assess whether that's something that's a good idea for you. Chris Catherine Rush, in I think it was 2019, did an excellent presentation in 20Books on writing short stories and making short stories work. I would recommend you go back and watch that if you have not seen it, if you're interested in pursuing this. She would submit to trad pub magazines, anthologies, but all of these are things that paid by the word, so she was getting paid for what she did, not some nebulous promise of future royalties, but upfront payment. Because she was doing it for the money, and she was being, this is a business, I'm not doing this for exposure. I want to be paid. And I want to be guaranteed the payment, not sort of a promise that may be broken later. And for that, she then built up quite a body of work of short stories. Then you have the option of doing the short story collection of KKR, or whoever, yourself, or maybe you get together with a bunch of others and create a new anthology once rights have reverted. What can you do with that? How can you leverage that? Can you use it as newsletter content to, I'm only releasing a book every 6 months and my readers are getting restless. Give them a short story. They haven't seen it for a couple of years and it'll make them feel happy. As
an organizer, you can leverage that as well. So for those of you who were in Melanie Harlow's talk earlier, she was talking about writing bonus content and using that to hook people in from your newsletter and things. As an organizer for the anthology, as well as alignment with other authors, you can brand your anthology with a theme. So each of our anthologies had a running theme through them. So for example, you could write like all of the submissions need to be a Christmas theme, or they all need to have weddings in it, or they all need to have babies in it, or like one was Solstice for us.
So we did urban fantasy and paranormal romance in parallel. I think we got a little bit cocky and like, what were we thinking? But we did it around the theme of the Summer Solstice in June, and that was when the anthology's released. So all the stories had to feature the Summer Solstice. They're all happening in June. And then how does that work? Except for one story, who wanted her story to happen around Christmas. She basically got confused and thought it was the winter solstice. So then she said, my story happens in Australia. Genius, I was hoping someone would pick that up. So her story was happening the 21st of December, because that was summer solstice, down under. But you can play on it in different ways. But you have to, whatever the element of the theme is, you have to have it. There's another one that's going on at the moment, and it was a Christmas anthology. Each person was given an item from the Christmas tree. So one was the candy cane, one was the Christmas star, and somebody else had the angel, and they had to work those into the story. So there can be themes. There was another one, it was like kind of vampires at Halloween and werewolves at Christmas. And there's a whole series of a particular paranormal creature at different holidays throughout the year. Zombies for Valentine's Day, I think, was another one. But it's so that you can brand it quite tightly, and then people who like ghost stories
or Christmas stories or Thanksgiving or
So, but again, some of those things help as an organizer to create a cohesion. I mean, if you think about how you're going to brand this, you've got 20-something stories. How are you going to put a tagline together for that? What's the blurb you're going to write and organize for 20 stories that you haven't read yet? If it's about a theme, Thanksgiving, holiday struggles, think about a Hallmark movie. You don't really need to know what it's about. You could probably write the same blurb that'll fit most of them. But home for the holidays, sometimes coming home is wonderful, sometimes, you don't, not so much. These heartwarming tales of reunions and reconciliations will, brighten your Christmas and warm your winter heart.
She's doing my next blurb. She can't map, but she can blurb.
But something like this, where you're like, oh right, well that sounds like, those are the stories I want to read. It's like, like any Hallmark movie, you know what you're getting. In the same way, if you've branded your anthology requirements, you can sell that because you know who you're targeting, and you just make sure that the content matches what you're selling, rather than getting all the content and then trying to say, what do I do with this? How do I create a theme out of things that are completely disparate? So as an organizer, plan up front. As a submitter, if there is a theme, it's not optional.
One more thing before we take some questions. For the organizers, please pay attention to your covers, because I, in my personal anthology, picked a cover that was not advertisable on Amazon or Facebook, which meant that my anthology did not do particularly well because I was not able to advertise it. And then Jimmy Albright, sweet rom-com author, messaged me and she was like, why don't you change it? And I was like, no, I'm sticking it to the patriarchy. I'm doing all of this, I'm digging my heels in. I should have listened to her, I should have changed the cover to something more discreet. Pay attention to those kind of details, because don't be like me. Learn from my lessons. Because I had a really good book with really good stories. They were very well edited. I just could not get them, couldn't get it in front of the people I wanted it to be read by, because I had a honking great pink vibrator on the cover. So. Sorry, every person's crying here.
Okay. So I think that covers what we had as, what an anthology is, why you might get involved and what you might get out of it. So, open to questions. Yes. So, please try to talk loudly so that we can get on the recording.
Okay, I can do that. So, marketing, would you do something different to market an anthology versus, just a single book? And if so, what would that be?
I would say, remember that an awful lot of what we talk about in marketing in 20Books is about the benefit of the read-through for series because it can be expensive. If you're actually trying to do ads like Facebook or Amazon, they're unlikely to do a return, especially when you consider that you're meant to be splitting the profit 20-something ways. So I would say that you would want to leverage, as an organizer, leverage the people in your newsletter, in your anthology with their newsletters. Now, does this mean that you might have selection criteria that isn't stated that says people with larger followings and more rabid fan bases and bigger names will get higher preference? Yes, it does, because it lifts everybody. Elena, being the lead for Sweet Romance, just raised that bar, and so many people got...
We were not shy about leaning into that at all.
And in the same way, Martha Carr led the Urban Fantasy Anthology, and that was a lift because it was an entire rabid readership of urban fantasy people who were like, here, do you want some more new favourite authors? And like, yes, we do! And that made a huge difference. If you were trying to get the sales by advertising alone, you're going to hit profitability. Now, what are the goals of the anthology? So if your goal is profitability, paid ads are probably going to be problematic. Things like if you're doing a 99-cent bargain discount, and then things like Fussy Librarian or
Bargain
Booksy and the other newsletters for discounted books. Because again, the 26 stories of the Sweet Romance was 205,000 words in the book as a whole. If people read through, I think that was like 3 times the royalty of the buy price. So even at 99 cents, when people are more likely to do read through and do page reads, it's worth it. You can still make quite a lot of money, but if you get in front of the right readers. And that's a fixed cost rather than an ongoing learn the algorithm type cost, where by the time you've trained it might take a month to train the data and you've only got 3 months to sell the book. It can become very costly to do paid advertising. So if you're though trying to go for, we want this everywhere because this is our launch pad for example, when the 13 authors put together paranormal women's fiction, a brand new genre which was urban fantasy, but with 40+ heroines. It's like, what is this? They coordinated so that they were all launching at the same time. So if someone read one book, it's like, what is this? Like, well, here's some more books that you'll like. We're making a genre out of nothing. Now, if you were to do that with an anthology, so you want to say, here's a new set of standards to look for, whether that's a Hallmark movie, the older urban fantasy, the thriller, the cozy mystery that doesn't have Granny as the sleuth, but instead has somebody else. Like, what is that you're trying to do differently? And then that might be exposure. You might not care about making money because you just want to get this in as many hands as possible, start changing the conversations. But again, it's like, why are you doing this anthology as an organizer? And then what promises have you made to the people joining your anthology about what they're getting out of it? And make sure that those are aligned.
So for 20Books, we hit marketing more so than advertising. So at the back of everyone's story, we had a short blurb about each author and a link to whatever link they wanted to submit that they want, like either a newsletter link, their Amazon page, but we also set up a marketing spreadsheet and a calendar for each of the authors. So not everyone shared it on release day, not everyone shared their newsletter on the same day. We went 3 months, we broke it down into each author. We tried to have heavy hitters spread out throughout the whole time. So it was a constant rolling in front of everybody. So we didn't hit it hard with the financial advertising itself, but we did a lot of behind the scenes. We also set up a Facebook page for each of the anthologies, and we did interviews with the authors, and we had engagement that way, and we drew readers in that way. So we kind of got creative with a lot of it's a short window of time, we need to get it out to as many people as possible, so we went on various social medias. We had you know, newsletter swaps with people. So there are ways to get it out there that don't involve spending a fortune on ads, because ultimately we all want to make more money than we spend, right? And with an anthology, like Erika said, there is no read-through. Do you want to?
Sorry.
So what would be a typical runtime for the planning of an anthology?
We did it in, so I think Craig asked us in September, and we published our first one in January? December. It was 4 weeks.
December 16th.
4 months.
December.
That feels really short, but like when
It
you
was crazy.
It was crazy.
yeah.
So here, it's crazy for 2 reasons. Well, I mean, there was a Marine in charge. He just kind of figured everyone would get to know. But as an organizer, how long does it take to put a story together if you've never considered this? Especially if you're putting in quite a detailed theme. It's not like they can just whip something out of the drawer that they've had before and dust it off.
I think for mine it was 3 months for my good vibes. I gave them, but I was very clear, this is the first submission deadline, this is the second submission deadline, this is the final deadline, this is the publishing deadline, and I think it was a 12-week window. And that felt far more comfortable. I mean, we did it, we won it, winged it.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But it was a little more comfortable to buy a bit more time.
Okay.
At the back?
If it helps to know, I edit the Pets in Space anthology, and I do 9 months. Contracts go out in January, manuscripts are due in June, and then we publish in October. And that's much easier to manage if you have a life and other commitments,
And there is no
and,
pandemic.
say, cats who want to be fed. So it can vary.
Yeah, and thank you. I think that is more realistic. I think, as Lasairiona said, we were doing this in the middle of the pandemic where everything had been put on hold anyway, so we're all like sitting at home going, what do we do?
But also for those who speak strengths, Erika and I are both high strategic, so whenever someone gives us a project, we strategize and we can execute it pretty quickly.
So basically, what you're suggesting is that when you're coming up with these things, make sure that you have an idea of where you're structuring and how you're managing your time while doing
Yes.
it.
Yes.
Okay.
And also, as an organizer, give yourself a lead time before you announce it. Make sure you've got all your ducks in a row first. And we're not counting that time. We're talking about the time from announcement of submissions are open to when we publish, not about the time that you prep, getting everything ready so that you can hit all those dates yourself as the organizer. There was a question here at the front.
If your goal for submitting or having something in an anthology is to kind of create a gateway to your series, what are some tips that you have for helping bridge that gap, bring people over from it?
I would say the biggest one is to have a catchy blurb or pitch, I call it, at the end of your short story. So, you know, Charlotte does her origin story and she discovers she's got magic powers and she's about to go, she defeats her first vampire. And then you say, you know, she goes on to do this, see her in action from book 1, and you give the link for that. Or, you know, find the whole, this is the first part of the Hidden Werewolf series, you know, find it on Amazon, here's the link. So you want to highlight the fact that that is linked in. Now you may not have a room to do a pitch, so what about your bio? So the author of the Hidden Werewolf series featuring this character, so her further adventures, put into your bio. Don't just use your standard bio, leverage that real estate to get people aware that if they liked your story, there's more available and where to find it.
I would also say pick a character that is either beloved or controversial. Something that is going to hook people. So for one of mine, I used a cocky hockey player that all of my readers are obsessed with. And I mean, I could just write 1,000,000 books for him and they would buy every single one because they're obsessed with him. And that draws people in. If your existing superfans love this character, chances are the readers that you're trying to target will also love that character. And everyone loves to hate a villain, right? So if you've got a really lovable, love to hate kind of guy, write a story from one of your stronger characters or your more enticing side characters to gain your regular readers as well as your future readers. Think about your characters. We have 18 seconds left, so we are going to say thank you very much for coming.